Okay, so you want to own a driving range. And honestly, of all the businesses anybody has ever pitched you, this one looks like the least complicated. You buy a field, you put up a net, you buy some golf balls once, and then people pay you $6 to hit them, and then you drive a little armored tractor out there and pick them all up, and you sell the exact same balls again tomorrow. Think about that for a second, because it is genuinely strange. Your inventory comes back. A range ball is built to be hit hundreds, sometimes thousands of times before it is retired, and a decent one lasts 2 or 3 seasons. You are not selling a product. You are renting the same product out over and over until it wears out. There is no restaurant on earth with that. There is no shop on earth with that. You buy the thing once and sell it 10,000 times. But here's the part nobody mentions while you are standing on the mat. In 2021, Callaway paid $2.6 billion for Topgolf. Topgolf is the most successful version of this business that has ever existed. And in 2025, Callaway sold 60% of it to a private equity firm in a deal that valued the whole thing at $1.1 billion, less than half of what they paid. Along the way, they wrote off $1.45 billion. So the best driving range business ever built destroyed more than $1 billion of value in 4 years. And it did it while demand was setting records. In 2025, 48.1 million Americans played golf. 19 million of them never touched a golf course at all. They played only at ranges, simulators, and places like Topgolf. Off-course golf is up 50% in a decade. Record demand, the best margin structure in retail, and $1 billion gone. By the end of this, you will know exactly where that money went, exactly what OneBay earns in an hour, and exactly which version of this business actually works. Because one of them does. It is just not the one with the 4 stories and the fireworks. Start with the ball, because the ball is the reason anybody gets interested in this business in the first place. A range ball is not a golf ball. It looks like one, and it is a completely different object. A real golf ball is engineered for performance. A soft cover, layers, spin. A range ball is engineered for abuse. 2 pieces, a cheap rubber core, a thick, hard cover that will survive being hit with a driver, bouncing off a fence, sitting in wet grass overnight, and going through a washing machine full of other golf balls. They are built to be hit hundreds, sometimes thousands of times. A well-managed range gets 2 or 3 seasons out of a ball. Now, do the arithmetic that everybody does. A bucket costs the customer about $6. Call it 80 balls. So the customer is paying roughly 7.5 cents a ball, and you paid for that ball once, maybe 2 years ago, and you have collected on it every single day since. If you have ever wondered why the range is not embarrassed to charge $6 for something that costs them essentially nothing, that is why. The cost of goods sold on a bucket of range balls in any given transaction rounds to 0. And this is where almost everybody who looks at this business gets it wrong. So I want to be very clear about it now because it shapes everything that follows. The margin on the ball is real. It is also irrelevant. That is not a paradox. And it is not a trick. It is just that the ball was never the expensive part. In this business, the ball is the only thing that is cheap. Everything else, the dirt, the netting, the lights, the building, the person at the counter on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody comes, is fixed. It costs the same whether one person shows up or 400 do, which means the entire business is a question about one thing, and it is not margin. It is occupancy. Here is the thing about the customer that took the industry about 40 years to work out. Almost nobody at a driving range is practicing. The industry assumed for decades that a range was a training facility, an annex to the golf course, a place where serious golfers went to fix a slice. Under that assumption, you compete on the quality of the mats, the trueness of the balls, and how far the field stretches. It is a golf product sold to golfers. Then the National Golf Foundation went and counted. In 2025, 48.1 million Americans played golf in some form. 29.1 million of them played on an actual course, and 19 million played golf without ever setting foot on one. Not once. They played exclusively off course, at ranges, at simulators, at entertainment venues. 19 million people are playing a sport without playing the sport. And when you look at who they are, it stops looking like golf entirely. Among the people who play only off course, 43% are women and 45% are people of color. That is not the demographic anybody associates with a country club, and that is precisely the point. Those people are not buying practice. They are buying an activity. They are buying somewhere to stand outside with 3 friends and a drink and do something with their hands for an hour. The golf is the excuse, and the outing is the product. That single reclassification is what turned a sleepy piece of cheap suburban land into something private equity would pay billions for. Because a training facility competes with other training facilities. An activity competes with bowling, mini golf, cinemas, and bars, and that market is enormously larger. It also changes what you are allowed to charge, which brings us to how this business actually meters money. Forget buckets. The number the industry actually runs on is revenue per bay hour. Take one hitting bay. Take 1 hour. How many dollars can that specific rectangle of concrete produce in that hour across everything? Balls, food, drinks, lessons, club rental. That is the whole business expressed as a single figure, and a healthy range runs somewhere between $45 and $80 per bay hour. Sit with that range for a second, because the gap between the two ends of it is the entire story of this industry. $45 an hour is a traditional range. A mat, a bucket, a guy practicing. $80 an hour is a bay where a group of 4 are ordering food, buying a second round, and staying 2 hours instead of 40 minutes. Same concrete, same balls, almost double the money. And once you see the business as bay hours, the shape of it becomes obvious and slightly brutal. A 10 to 20 bay facility with a full experience attached can produce anywhere from $1,000 to $9,000 per bay per month. That is a 9-fold spread. 9 times on identical physical infrastructure. Nothing in that spread is about golf. The bay does not know whether it is having a good month. The spread is entirely about how many hours of the day that bay is occupied, and how much the people in it spend while they are there. So there are only ever 2 levers in this business. Fill more hours, or get more dollars out of the hours you already fill. Every single thing you are about to see, the technology, the food, the leagues, the heaters, the ridiculous 4-story buildings, is one of those 2 levers. There is not a third one. But before any of that, you have to deal with the thing sitting underneath all of it, and it is the thing that actually ate Callaway's $1 billion. A driving range needs land. A lot of it in a very specific shape, and that requirement is the hinge the whole business swings on. You need something in the region of 10 to 15 acres for a full-length range, laid out long and relatively narrow with nothing behind it you would mind hitting. And the cruel part is where that land has to be. It has to be close enough to a population to be convenient, because nobody drives 40 minutes to hit a bucket of balls after work, so you need a lot of land, near people. Those 2 requirements are in direct opposition, and the price tells you so. Rural land runs somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 an acre. Suburban and urban land runs $50,000 to $200,000 an acre, and can go far past that. Run it. 12 acres of cheap rural land might be $60,000, and almost nobody lives near it. 12 acres of good suburban land, where the customers actually are, is well over $1 million before you have bought a single golf ball. This is why the traditional range business quietly went sideways for 30 years. The land under a suburban driving range is almost always worth more as houses. Every operator eventually gets the phone call from a developer, and the math of that call is not close. A range producing $200,000 to $650,000 a year in revenue is sitting on dirt somebody will pay millions for tomorrow. So ranges closed. Not because they were failing, because the ground under them appreciated faster than the business on top of it could ever earn. Hold on to that because it is going to come back and it is going to turn out to be the answer. To see where the money actually is, you have to watch the same building on two different days. Tuesday, 10 in the morning. The range is open, the lights are on, the mats are down, the netting is up, somebody is being paid to stand at the counter, and the property taxes are accruing exactly as fast as they will on Saturday. There are 4 people on a 40-bay range. That is 10% occupancy, and every one of your costs is running at 100%. The ball machine works, the balls are fine, the margin on those 4 buckets is beautiful. And the building is losing money by the minute because the building does not care about margin. It cares about hours. Now the same building, Friday, 7 in the evening. Every bay is full. There is a wait. The groups are 4 people, not 1. They are ordering food. They are on their second round. Critically, they are staying an hour and 40 minutes instead of the 35 minutes a solo practicing golfer stays, and the whole time that clock runs the bay is producing at the top of the range rather than the bottom. That is the business, not the ball, not the swing, not the golf. Friday night is the business, and Tuesday morning is the tax you pay to be open on Friday, which reframes the whole industry once you see it. Every innovation in the sector for 20 years has been an attempt to make Tuesday morning look more like Friday night. Heated bays, so winter is not dead. Covered bays, so rain is not dead. Leagues and lessons to fill the dead hours with something contracted. Food, so people stay longer. Technology, so a bay is entertaining rather than repetitive. And that last one, the technology, is where somebody worked out that you could charge a completely different kind of customer a completely different kind of money. Topgolf is not a driving range. I want to be precise about that because the entire misunderstanding of this business lives in that sentence. Topgolf is a large restaurant and bar with a golf attraction bolted to the side of it, and it is engineered around the occupancy problem we just watched. Look at what it does to a bay. A traditional bay serves one person who wants to practice, and he leaves in half an hour and buys nothing. A Topgolf bay serves a group of 4 to 6 who are not golfers, who stay for 2 hours, who order food, who order drinks, who are playing a points-based game rather than practicing, and who booked a time slot in advance so you know they are coming. Every one of those is a direct attack on the thing that kills ranges. And it works at the level of a single venue. Topgolf venues generate somewhere between $13 and $18 million a year for a smaller site and $20 to $28 million for a large one. The averages that have been disclosed put a venue around $17 million of revenue with roughly $5 million of adjusted earnings. Those are extraordinary numbers for a building where the primary activity is hitting a ball into a net. So the concept is not broken. The unit works, which makes what happened next genuinely interesting, and it is not the story most people tell. Because to get those numbers, you have to build a Topgolf, and most Topgolf venues, about 3/4 of them, have over 100 bays across multiple stories. They cost between $30 and $40 million each to build. $30 to $40 million for one building to sell buckets of balls at extremely good margins. And that is the trade the entire company was making over and over, roughly 10 times a year. Now the part of this business that never shows up in the pitch, and there are 2 of them. The first we have already met, and it is the reusable ball. But I want to put a real number on it because people nod at it and then fail to appreciate how strange it is. You buy a range ball once. It is hit hundreds to thousands of times over 2 or 3 seasons. If a single ball goes out in a bucket even twice a day for 2 years, that is well over 1,000 rentals of an object you bought one time. There is no other retail business in America where the inventory returns to the shelf by itself, gets washed, and is sold again the next morning. The armored tractor going up and down the field is not maintenance. It is restocking. The second one is bigger, and it is the one that actually decides whether you get rich. the land. We said suburban rangeland runs $50,000 to $200,000 an acre. A 12-acre range is therefore sitting on something worth well into seven figures. And in a growing metro, it is compounding underneath you every year you operate. So the honest accounting of a driving range is two businesses stacked on the same parcel. On top, a modest operating business doing a couple of $100,000 to $650,000 a year of revenue. Underneath, an appreciating land position that in many markets earns more per year, doing nothing, than the range on top of it clears in profit. Which explains something that confuses people about this industry. A range that looks like it is barely surviving can be an outstanding investment, and a range that looks busy can be a bad one. And the difference is not on the income statement at all, it is on the deed. The operators who have done best in this business over 30 years mostly did not win by selling more buckets. They won by owning the dirt and waiting. So if the land is the asset and the ball is free, why did anybody bother building $35 million buildings at all? Because of the 19 million. Go back to that figure, because it is the most important number in this entire industry, and it is quite new. 19 million Americans now play golf exclusively off course. Not as a warm-up, not as practice for Saturday. That is the whole activity for them, and total participation on course and off has hit an all-time high of 48.1 million, up 50% over the decade. For 100 years, this business was capped by the number of golfers, and the number of golfers is a hard ceiling. You cannot manufacture more golfers quickly. Golf is expensive, slow, difficult, and intimidating, and it takes years to become competent enough to enjoy it. Off-course golf removed every one of those barriers at once. You need no skill. You need no equipment. It takes 2 hours, not 6. There is no dress code, nobody is waiting behind you, and being bad at it is actively funny rather than humiliating. That is why 43% of the off-course only group are women, and 45% are people of color. It is not that golf suddenly diversified. It is that a different product got invented, and it happened to use golf balls. And once you understand that, the $35 million building stops looking insane. If you genuinely believe you have found a new mainstream leisure category, one that competes with cinemas and bowling alleys rather than with country clubs, then building the big flagship version and covering the country in them is not reckless. It is the obvious move, which is exactly what Callaway believed, and it is why the way it went wrong is so instructive. But before we get to that, there is a middle path, and it is the single most important thing in this video if you are ever going to actually do this. You do not have to build a Topgolf to get Topgolf's economics. You can rent them. The company sells a product called Toptracer Range. It is ball tracking technology, the same lineage as the tracer line you see on television installed into the bays of an ordinary existing driving range. It turns a mat and a bucket into a screen with games, distances, and targets. Here's the commercial structure, and it is unusually founder-friendly. Installation is free. Topgolf does not sell you the hardware, it leases it, and it takes 2 to 4 days to fit. The operator pays roughly $225 per bay per month. Now the return. Bays fitted with the technology have been shown to produce close to double the revenue of bays without it. At the Golf Center of Arlington in Texas, the traced bays brought in 205% more revenue than the ordinary stalls. Read that again because in most industries, a claim like that would be nonsense. Roughly $225 a month of cost against doubling the revenue of a bay that was already producing $45 to $80 an hour. And notice what it does to the two levers. People stay longer because there is a game rather than a repetitive task, which fills hours. And they will pay more per hour because they are buying an activity instead of practice. It attacks both levers with one install on land you already own, in a building you already have. That is the whole opportunity in this business, sitting in plain sight. Hold on to it. Because we are about to watch a very large company spend $2.6 billion learning it the hard way. In March of 2021, Callaway, the golf club manufacturer, completed its acquisition of Topgolf. The price was $2.6 billion. The company renamed itself Topgolf Callaway Brands. And at first it looked like one of the great calls in modern sport business. By 2022, Topgolf was generating close to 40% of the combined company's total revenue. The thesis was working. The venues were full. Off-course golf was exploding exactly as predicted. So they built. Topgolf went from around 60 venues in 2020 to roughly 100 today, about 89 of them in the United States, across 9 countries, at $30 to $40 million a building. Then 2 things happened, and neither of them was about golf. Inflation arrived, and interest rates went up hard. For a company whose growth model is to borrow money and pour concrete, that is not a headwind, it is a different game entirely. The buildings cost more to build, and the money to build them cost more to borrow simultaneously. And at the same time, the venues themselves cooled. Same venue sales fell 9% in 2024. In 2025, the company guided to another mid-single-digit decline. The customer who had discovered Topgolf during the boom did not come back quite as often. And against a $35 million building, slightly less often is not a small problem. Then the accounting caught up. The company took an impairment charge of $1.45 billion, which is the formal admission that the asset is not worth what was paid for it. In 2025, Callaway agreed to sell a 60% stake in Topgolf to the private equity firm Leonard Green and Partners in a deal that valued Topgolf at $1.1 billion. $2.6 billion in, $1.1 billion out, 4 years later. And I want to be careful about the lesson because the obvious one is wrong. Topgolf did not fail. The venues still do $17 million a year. The concept was right. The 19 million people are real and the demand is still there. What failed was the cost of the box you put it in. So let us line up the 2 versions of this business side by side, because they are barely the same industry. Version 1, the flagship. $30 to $40 million to build. 100 plus bays over multiple stories. $17 million of revenue. About $5 million of adjusted earnings in a good year. On paper, the payback is somewhere around 2.5 years, which is why anybody does it at all. But it only holds if the building fills, if rates stay low, and if the novelty does not fade. Miss on any one of those, and you are servicing debt on a $35 million asset with a 9% sales decline. That is the machine that produced a $1.45 billion write-down. Version 2, the range. A conventional operation runs somewhere near $216,000 in fixed startup cost. A genuinely low-tech setup can be done around $100,000. Revenue lands somewhere between $200,000 and $650,000 a year, occasionally more. The honest warning in the industry is that most of these do not reach real profitability inside 3 years. Now put the technology on version 2, roughly $225 per bay per month, installed free in under a week, with evidence of bays doubling their revenue and one facility reporting 205% more. A 20-bay range is paying about $4,500 a month for that. If it moves the revenue anywhere near what the operators report, it is the highest return decision available in this entire industry, by an enormous margin. And underneath both versions, in every case, sits the land. $50,000 to $200,000 an acre, 10 to 15 acres appreciating whether you had a good Tuesday or not, which finally answers the question we opened with, and I have been holding it for 22 minutes. The money did not disappear into golf. It disappeared into construction. Callaway was right about everything that mattered. They were right that off-course golf was a new mainstream category, right that 19 million people would show up who had never played a round in their lives, right that a bay full of 4 people ordering food beats a bay with 1 man practicing. Every part of the thesis held. They were wrong about exactly one thing, and it was the box. They chose to express a correct idea in $35 million of steel and concrete, 10 times a year, into rising interest rates. The idea survived. The balance sheet did not. So the version that works is the inverse of it, and it is almost boring. You buy a range that already exists, ideally a tired one, on land somebody else already cleared and permitted and netted. You are buying it for a fraction of a new build, and the hard part, the 12 acres near a population, is already solved. Then you rent the economics instead of building them. Toptracer installs free in 2 to 4 days at roughly $225 a bay per month, and the operators report bays doing double. You have just bought Topgolf's customer, the group of 4 who stay 2 hours and order food, without buying Topgolf's building, and then you do the thing the best operators in this industry have quietly done for 30 years. You hold the dirt, because the ball is free, the range is a modest business, and the land underneath it is the actual asset. That is the whole answer. Do not build the flagship. Buy the dead one, retrofit it, and own the ground. The lesson generalizes, and it is worth taking with you. Callaway did not lose $1 billion because they were wrong about the customer. They lost it because being right about the customer is not the same as being right about the capital. A correct idea expressed too expensively still ends in a write-down. If you got something out of this one, subscribe. I break down exactly one business like this every week, all the way down to the real numbers. Next time, the drink with 90% margins that still puts most of its owners out of business inside 2 years.